So I kind of have this theory on why the Democrats lost the election, right? And if they don't make adjustments, how it impacts your money, how it impacts maybe your investments, potentially for generations. So I don't know. But anyway, welcome
Hmm.
to the No Dumb Questions podcast, which is always the podcast about your money and your financial literacy. Along with Doug Flynn, I'm Connell McShane. I think we take Doug a little bit of a kind of a turn today, maybe,
Yep.
but I don't think it's as much of a turn as people think, because you have to know something, right, about the financial landscape. You have to have some
Hmm.
knowledge in order to make the right decisions about your money. And for example, what year did you graduate college? Was that 1930?
Yeah, I was the depths of the depression. No, it was 1989. So it was right. We came out in a that was a recession into the early 90s
Right.
after the crash of 87 on Wall Street, laying off a lot of people. Many people exited that industry, and so nobody was really looking to hire in 1989 when I was
So it
coming out.
affects kind of the environment, right? So, and I
It
graduated
does.
in '99, so that was at the height of, the economy was
Oh,
roaring and the
sure.
tech boom and everything else. And they bring it up because I was doing some research when that story came out about China and that company, DeepSeek challenging
Hmm.
Chat GPT, and Mark Andreessen had made some comments on that, the famous venture capitalist from Andreessen Horowitz, who had founded Netscape and has been around Silicon Valley forever. And he graduated in 1994,
Hmm.
right? He graduated in 1994 from the University of Illinois. And the reason I know that, I was reading some of the things he was saying about DeepSeek, but then got into a podcast that he'd been interviewed on. It was a New York Times podcast where he was talking about his kind of political transformation that he's made
Right.
as well. Apparently, he's a lifelong Democrat who now supports Trump. And I was thinking about it. At first, you start to be dismissive of some of these people, and then you start to think, well, a lot of people are in the same boat that were like him. And
Hmm.
he told the story, which kind of, I think, explains a lot. Some of it may seem obvious, but explains a lot. So he gets out in '94, and he was he was talking a lot about how at the University of Illinois they had a lot of advanced technology. They had like what we called supercomputers, so they were kind of ahead of the game. And
Sure.
he felt like he did a lot of work early that people in the industry weren't even doing. He takes that to Silicon Valley, finds is the founder of Netscape, so on and so forth. There goes the story. And he was talking, joking sort of about how Al Gore, in his view, gets kind of a bad rap. People used to make fun of Al Gore. So, oh, I invented the internet, and
That's right.
remember that? And
I
then
do.
and he said, well, he never really said that. What he said was, when he was in the Senate, he pushed for a lot of the funding for those things, like the supercomputers that people were
Mhm.
using at the colleges and things like that. And he claims, and he really feels that Al Gore actually had a big influence
Mhm.
on the early days of the internet because of the funding that he pushed for. Right? Not, he
Right.
didn't
Right.
invent it, but he had a big influence. So obviously, this comes at a time where Al Gore becomes vice president and Bill Clinton's the president in '92. And he goes through this whole thing where the Democrats then, for like these young tech people like Andreessen and many others out in Silicon Valley and other places, they were just like the perfect mix, right? Because they had all, as he described, all the kind of the right social positions. In other words, a lot of
Hmm.
young people were liberal on social issues. They liked that, but they weren't, they were also pro-business. And then people say, well,
Right.
will they really? Well, they weren't anti-business. In other words, they didn't go after businesses as much as you see from liberal politicians today. If anything, they cut regulations, right? They were
Yeah.
kind of, they had
Yes,
this
they did.
environment where they were pro Wall Street, they were pro Silicon
Mhm.
Valley, and then the obvious exception was that they were for higher taxes. So people say, well, is that pro business? And this is the part, I don't know what you think of this, but this is the part where really kind of interested in me because it speaks to mindset. And that was where people are now. I think
Mhm.
the mindset has really changed on this. He was saying that he thinks a lot of people misread, CEOs and other, high net worth people, or just people that are big, successful in business. And they think that all they care about and their only priority is profit margins and like their own personal net worth. That's all they care about. And his point was like, no, that is a priority, but it's rarely, sometimes, but rarely is it the
Mhm.
number one priority. And he said that a
Definitely.
lot of these people, especially when they get to a position where they're really successful,
Hmm.
they care about it sounds funny, but I do think it's true. They care about being a good person,
Yeah.
and just as, if not more importantly, being perceived as a good person, being
Sure.
thought of by others as a good person. So they were fine with paying a little bit more in taxes because they were making
Right.
so much money. Their businesses were so successful. They felt like,
Yeah.
all right, you know what? I'm giving back. These guys are doing all the right.
Exactly.
They're helping society. They're right on the social issues I believe in, but they're putting this environment in place where my business can be successful. So I don't know if we could, that would be where I would stop for a second, but I hadn't thought about that as deeply. And I do hear it, especially from a lot of young people today that, oh, look at these Zuckerberg and Bezos and this billionaire class, these oligarchs and all this kind of stuff, that all they care about is how much money that they make. And I start to think they can't possibly only care about that because
No.
they have so much money that it wouldn't even matter. Right. So I do
Right.
think he's right about some of that.
Yeah. I think giving back is a key part of if you would hope, but I think it is a key
Yeah.
part, not only of them, but of a lot of people when they attain wealth, no matter how you attain your wealth, at some point when you have enough, whatever enough might be for you and your family.
Right.
You
Yeah.
start-
And it doesn't have to be billions. You know
No.
what I mean? Like not always billions. And obviously there's always some schmuck who doesn't care about anything, right?
Yes, there's always that.
And that gets a bad rap. I get it
That's true.
that exists, but I just do think he's right about this general feeling that, and that affects how people, you know, go about their lives and what their politics are. And it's some of that now, it just seems different now. You know what I mean? Like they're not acknowledging that, and that
No.
if you don't, you're kind of missing the point, and missing the point of why this guy, Andreessen, but why Zuckerberg, or why
Right.
even Bezos, you know, why these people maybe that are predisposed to be kind of more liberal, it's kind of how they see the world, are now going to Trump. I think they're
Yeah.
missing the point, you know, and it matters because if they don't get this, to me, the reason I wanted to bring it up on our podcast is like, I feel like it has a long-term effect, like, right, you know, you and I have actually talked about this, I think, on TV. It's like, if you have a political position, you know, investing your money based on that political position is
Oh,
not
yeah.
always a great idea. But
No.
I do think it's important to understand what the political landscape is. You know, whether you're a reporter, don't let your own personal views get in the way of what might be the most likely outcome. Try to figure that out because it helps
Yeah.
you ask better questions. But same thing, right? As an investor, don't you think?
Yes, I do. And I think that the thing that money does, and I don't think enough people really understand, is what it does is it just magnifies your personality and what you're about. So if you're a good person, money can help you become even more of a good person. If you're a jerk, yes, money can magnify you being a jerk, and you can be a bigger jerk. But if you are inclined to do and more for people, help others, maybe you got help and you want to give back, those kinds of things can be enhanced with the ability that once you're set in your situation, you can kind of give back and do more, and you can do that in a number of ways. And so people are doing that on both sides of the spectrum. Whatever's you know, they care about most. It might be different things from the people on the left, from the people on the right, but I think the commonality of successful people that get to that point, they do want to do things with their money. And there are a lot of business owners, and in the United States, I think there's over 33 million small businesses. Actually, there's 33 million businesses. 99.9% of them are small businesses.
Right.
98% of them have less than 100 employees. 89% of them have less than 20 employees. So if you think about the United States, that covers a ton of people. And if
Right.
you're going to alienate those people,
You're not just alienating the big banks or the big tech
you are not.
companies. I totally. So that brings us to the next point. So like, when did this change, right? So if the Democrats were seen as a party that could be pro-business, it wasn't always just country club Republicans that, like, you know, there were Democrats, Bill Clinton and Al Gore being the examples, 8 years in the White House in the 90s, that were perceived as pro-business. When did it change? And so he continues, Andreessen, on this. And, you know, obviously a lot happened in the country. You know, Al Gore may very well been president if it wasn't for Monica Lewinsky and stuff like that. Who knows? But Bush becomes president, and then there's a lot of other things that happened: 9/11, Iraq, and all these things that influenced. Obama becomes president in 08, and I think he wasn't that much different at first than the Clinton Gore folks. He had, you know, like the likes of Tim Geithner and these pro kind of Wall Street people that were working on his team. But the circumstance was much different. What happened? 2008 happened, and the economy collapsed. So that's why I thought it was interesting to start with, like, when did you graduate college? So you come out in a recession. Andreessen comes out at when that recession is just being recovered from, and it's kind of the start of a boom. I come out of the middle of this great tech boom, and the world economy is going gangbusters. But people who got out, you know, 10 years later, give or take, a decade later, are in a totally different spot.
Yes.
And he said those people coming out in '08, so you think they're probably like mid-30s right now.
That's right.
They come into the workforce and they're basically, they want to burn the place down. They
Yes.
they think
They don't trust
capitalism's a
anything.
disaster. Right.
Correct.
Remember the Occupy Wall Street? And he said,
Yep.
well, it wasn't that many people. Here's the interesting point. He said it got to a point at the tech firms where there was probably like maybe he's exaggerating this slightly, but say for argument's sake, he says there's probably like 20% of the company or the firm that is, this activist type of person that literally is working at a place that they want to, destroy. They're all against all the principles. And he said, well, that doesn't really change too much. But the problem is the way he sees it is there's always like 50, 60% of your company doesn't really care and just goes along with whatever the loud voice in the room is doing. People
in the middle.
Right. So all of a sudden that becomes the consensus. And then Zuckerberg and these guys are dealing with a firm that's like 70, 80% activists. And then you have something like DEI, which we're talking about right now, which has good intentions, right? You want to be more diverse, equitable, inclusive, all of that.
Right.
Makes sense. But it goes way too far because these people are activists.
That's the problem.
And they want to basically
take it too far.
Right. They don't care about the money, profit margins for the company anymore. The point, giving back, making money for your shareholders, the whole purpose of being in business, they're going completely the other way. And he said that whole dynamic changed. And then he kind of, we go through COVID. I think that had something to do with it too. '08 and COVID, all the shutdowns, keeping the schools closed for too long. Again, kind of an arrogance that goes along with that. So that's another cultural, small businesses being locked down probably for too long too, to your point. Yeah, sure. And then he said, this is the end of it, right? So Andreessen and Horowitz, both of them, the partners, they go down to the White House to have a meeting in 2024 in the spring. So this is like at the end of Biden's term when he's supposedly still running for re-election before the debate debacle. And they think they're trying to meet with Biden, but as he tells the story, Biden's not meeting with anyone then apparently. He didn't know it at the time. But so they meet with like some of his top advisors. And he said the tone that they had from them, already they had kind of cracked down on crypto. Some of that may have been legit, like the Sam Bankman-Fried guy and all this kind of stuff. But they had cracked down on crypto and they were going after it in his view, and he was investing in a lot of those companies. But he was also, as a venture capitalist, investing in a lot of AI companies. And he said their tone for artificial intelligence was such that, you know what, guys, don't even think about going forward with startups. We're going to pick out a couple companies and back them, and the rest of them, we're going to regulate so hard that you'll go out of business, basically, was what he took away from the meeting. And he said, to that point, he was still, like, this guy had been a lifelong Democrat, and he got out of the meeting. So I guess we're for Trump, and then that's where he said the turn was. And I was thinking to myself, that's interesting because, a lot of people look at that and then say, well, how did Zuckerberg turn? This is a different person, but same idea. It's probably something similar that they looked, because now the narrative is that they're only in for, they were trying to curry favor with Trump. And I'm sure there's some truth to that because he's going to help them out. But what about reversing the question and saying, well, why did they leave the Democrats? Why did they leave the Biden crowd in that time period? And a lot of it just seems to be this attitude of, we're out to get you. And they felt like, all right, well, okay, I don't know what to tell you, but we're going to go for this guy who, by the way, we don't even like,
Right.
So it's just fascinating. And we talk to Democrats, we will on our show like every day. I don't see any sign that they're going to reverse that,
Wow.
And then I could be wrong, but I don't see any sign. And I think if they don't, then you have a totally different environment for a long time. Unlike when Clinton came in '92, kind of realized what was going on, saw where the wind was blowing, and and took advantage of it. I don't know.
True.
Maybe there is a Democrat, maybe like Pete Buttigieg or somebody realizes it. You know what I mean? But I don't know. So we'll see.
I think about two things. You mentioned when you come out, right? So that can taint you in terms of how your outlook is, as you mentioned, but also in your in your investments. And I had situations for the kids who kind of came out after the financial crisis in '09, and at that point, where their parents were long-term market investing people, and the children of them were super conservative, like,
because they didn't trust the system.
They didn't trust the system.
Right,
and
right.
like, if you're in your 20s and you're investing too conservatively, and I get why maybe you don't trust it, but that can really negatively impact you for a very long period of time. It works both ways. You fast forward now, and people have seen nothing but crazy market returns. We haven't had a recession to speak of to any degree.
Yeah.
So the last 10 years, people don't know of what even I experienced is where it was two people fighting for one job. There's two jobs for every person, and so you act differently, and then you're super aggressive. So either one, I think, are the extremes, and both of those do get corrected over time. Now, whether that's because of the circumstances, or you age, or you know, whatever you're going through,
Yeah, yeah.
or to your point, the what you thought you aligned with, as that evolves, they're not evolving with you, and you look in the mirror and say, you know, this doesn't 100% line up with the way that I thought before. And I think most people, you know, the 80% in the middle are somewhat around the middle and maybe
Yeah.
lean one way or the other. It's always those extremes that get all of the play. But the
Yeah, but
reality
they drag,
is,
to Andreessen's point earlier that I was talking about, they
yes,
drag people along with them, right? The loudest voice a lot of times will affect kind of the
absolutely.
conversation and how people see things.
You're
And
pulling
that's what I
people
think is
from the
happening.
middle over.
Right, right,
And
exactly. That's
yep,
still happening with liberals and within the Democratic Party. This type of a view that he's expressed is not really being heard, I feel like. And the reason it's not being heard is because most of those people, after getting fed up,
mhm,
have left, right? A
yes,
lot of them just left. So why? That's the whole point. Why are they all sitting behind Trump at the inauguration? There's Bezos and Zuck and Elon. I think
well,
Elon maybe is a little bit of a different story. He's got his own
yes,
issues probably, but still, the point is these are the richest, most powerful people in the world, Sundar Pichai, and there they are sitting behind Trump. And people say, "Well, this is the oligarchs and the billionaire class." And I'm thinking, there's got to be more. There's a little more to it than that. And
mhm,
you know, you've got to look in the mirror. Like, just take Donald Trump, for example, right? If you've
okay,
made Donald Trump president twice, but essentially, you've got to look in the mirror and say, what is it that my side, if you're on that side, is doing to create this kind of environment, and not
yeah,
just be saying, well, look at the country's a bunch of racists or whatever people say, because that can't be 100% true. Like, you know, that's only going to get him so far. There's got to be something that made these otherwise not only, I was going to say rational, but it's not really rational. These people who are otherwise inclined to support you, support him.
yeah.
You know,
I think
you know?
I think it's the middle again. I think
Yes.
the farther they went and more extreme, and you know, you had to shout louder and create more and more distractions and say bigger
Right.
things. You're pushing the people that were aligned with you away. So you're kind of pushing them to the middle. And if you push them too far to the middle, it's not that much of a stretch. A lot, you know, Trump and a lot of the people there are former Democrats themselves. So if you think
True.
about it, so there's something to be said for, you know, maybe they're not super right wing, but they were in the middle to some degree on certain issues, and you're pushing more people, and that's all it takes is a couple of percentage points on the edges to push you, and it, you know, all of a sudden the whole thing shifts the way that it
But
did.
you have to think people are kind of going after your livelihood, I think, though, to get to that point, right? Because, like, in theory, a lot of these people think, I've talked to them, and this is logical to me because in our reporting, I probably would come to the similar conclusion. Trump, at the end of 2020, nobody, it's January 2021, would have predicted that he went back. And most of these people would not have wanted him to go back because they thought what he did was disqualifying. Many
Right.
thought, and there's reason that he was indicted for it, that it was criminal, that he should have went to jail for the way he handled the post-election period in January 6th. Some of those people who think that, right, still voted for him. Like, think about that.
Yes.
Some of those people who actually still believe that to this day, if you ask them, what about Trump after the election? Oh, that was terrible. January 6th was an awful day.
Well,
I think he should have been in jail. They decided to go with him in 24. So it had to be relatively
yeah.
extreme in terms of how they viewed, to me, the other side. But
And,
where if he was the one that was, whatever you want to say, more normal or more acceptable to them, you
well, I
know?
also think that you know, if you start with the premise that everything is corrupt, then it's like, let me put that all in the same basket for a moment and then say, who's going to help my own personal economy better? Which
Right.
of the two candidates? Because if they're both corrupt and they both got all these issues, let me just negate that. They offset each other. And let's look at, are lower taxes better or are higher taxes better? Is he going to give me no taxes on particular items, or is he not? Like, what are those things? Are we going to those? And you start to check off a couple of things, and you say, if I remove the other parts of it and I focus
Yes.
on my own personal economy, then I think some of that it drove some of those people again in the middle to, you know, sort of not to discount what they were feeling and say, I'm going to vote with my pocketbook or my wallet, however you want to put it. But
It
I
kind of
think
be an
you
interesting
got
thing to
some of
look
those
at, like,
people.
for an investing environment in the future, to see, you know, like, whatever the next move is will be, will decide a lot because when you're kind of creating the environment and the overall tone, because the Democrats could go one of two ways. They could keep going the way they're doing, which I think is kind of fighting against a group that they think they should have, like just broadly call it the middle class. Like they think that those are their people, quote unquote, working class people. You know, everybody works, so sometimes these terms get thrown around and they just don't mean anything. But I know we essentially know what they mean. But they're talking largely when they say that about kind of blue collar workers. Sometimes it's your old school union workers who are traditionally Democratic, and they see this group slipping away to Trump. A lot of that's cultural, by the way. Trump taps in, talks like, you know, he gets these people, and he's talked to them the way they talk, doesn't talk down to them, and they feel attachment to him. So the Democrats fight for that. And I guess there's something to be said for that. You should, you know, maybe they're fighting for, they look at it, I think legitimately, some of them feel it. They're like, well, these are the people that I grew up fighting for, or my family did, and I want to stay in that fight. But they're, you know, almost missing this opportunity, similar to the one that Clinton took advantage of in '92. Is that why not? Because you made the exact right point earlier. Why are you so afraid to take the other side? Because you think you're for the rich people. That's it.
Right.
But again, like you said, 99% of the people that are in business are small businesses. So a lot of these people are not what you would describe as rich. They're certainly not billionaires. So, but what's wrong with creating an environment where they can thrive? And they don't, they see it as wrong. A lot of them, they see it as like, you know, being on the wrong side of history, essentially. So they're not willing, like Clinton was, to take that leap. And when he did, he won. And I know it's not 100% analogous. History, they say, rhymes, doesn't necessarily repeat itself. But you know, if someone did that, again, I mentioned Buttigieg earlier, or Newsom or Westmore, or somebody did that, I think they would have a better chance, to me, of winning than just doing the same thing all over and over again. You know, and then that creates this. So the larger point, I guess, for someone like you is like, what kind of an environment are we going to be in for investing if everybody's fighting over the same crowd, right? Because you think about Trump's not, you know, he's pro-business in many ways, but and he's taken advantage of that, and he's going to cut some regulations, he's going to cut some taxes and all of that. But he's also, you know, he you know, with his tariff policy, we'll see what happens with that. But he's, you know, picked up a lot of stuff that the old liberals used to be into, which was hammering business in some ways. That's how they used to. That's right. And the Republicans used to say, right? He's more pro-worker, more pro-union in some way. It's a weird situation where they're both fighting over the same crowd, and the Democrats are letting this other crowd just completely go. To me, it's a huge advantage, huge opening, you know.
It is. And perhaps somebody, I think, you know, when things swing too far one way or the other, they tend to swing back to a certain extent. But they could ride this for a while, and they're going to have to figure out just how they're going to reattract themselves to people in the middle. They don't have to go all the way to the other side. They just need to creep back some of the people that they lost. But I think as a backdrop, I always think about there's really like 4 key ways. You know, a lot of people, they're working and they're saying, I want to, you know, provide for my family and have a good future and retire, you know, basic things. And there's four key ways to become a millionaire in the US. These are the things that I think about. And the first way is to inherit it. And so most people are not that lucky, but you could inherit it from your
become
parents.
President then, you know. 400 million making, you know, whatever it is, and then become president. So I get it. That's where a lot of people, not just him, but a lot of people become millionaires. Absolutely.
There is a lot of transfer of wealth that's going to go on. So those people might instantly become millionaires and had never had any experience doing that. So suddenly, you know, they are the people that they were talking against all of this time. Now suddenly you're a millionaire. So that's one. The second way is to be a business owner. And in fact, 88% of the millionaires in the United States are a business owner. So if you think about it, a path to a millionaire can be a couple of ways. Inherit. One is to make a business, right? Create a business, create value. And so when you start to do those things, it changes your mindset a little bit. And so if you want to, you know, have some wealth, that's one of the key ways. Another way is to save and invest, right? Invest in the market. Whether even if you're working for a big company, you have the stocks of that company and you accumulate it. Your 401k, there's a lot of 401k millionaires. They don't have a lifestyle of a millionaire, but they've created that through saving and investing. So that's another way. And the fourth way I always talk about is just to become a member of Congress and trade with impunity, because then you can always become. So that's the other avenue. But when you put that one in a box for a moment, you say that's part of the problem is all of them are like that. You put them in the same thing. So what does it come back down to? There's the things that I can control, and what can I control? And I'm trying to, do better for myself, make some inroads, save, exist, maybe move a little bit ahead, give
Yeah.
my kids a better opportunity. So who's lining up with that now? And the middle was up for grabs. I think that's to your point here on what happened.
Yeah, I think that was my point. I think you're right. Yeah, you've made my point better than I did, and a lot more succinct. So, yeah, we got it off our chest, or I did this. Something I've been thinking about anyway. I think it sort of applies to what we talk about in this podcast each episode. And you can hit us up on social media, or leave a comment wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast, and you tell us what you think, and also give us some ideas for some future episodes. So what do you think? We'll get back to being boring next time around. So
Sounds good. Talking about money.
Talking about money. All right, Doug, good stuff. We'll see everybody and talk to everybody on the next edition of No Dumb Questions. For Doug Flynn, I'm Connell McShane. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.